I just want to make a quick video about why the Democrats' messaging on economics and economic issues aren't landing as hard as they should and could against Donald Trump and the Republicans. Once again, the Democrats have been caught flat-footed on the economic message against Donald Trump and the Republicans, and it shouldn't be like this considering how predictable he is. First, we as Democrats cannot have talking points that we know over time will help Trump in the long run or tilt in his favor, and fixate on short-term economic pain that we know over the long term will go away. An example of this is the stock market. The stock market was never going to be a long-term talking point that Democrats could sustain over the next 4 years. Why? Because we know, looking back at history, that the stock market is going to continue to go up pretty much no matter what, given enough time. We can look at the Great Depression, we can look at 9/11, the Great Recession, the 2020 COVID pandemic, and the stock market always recovers its losses no matter what, pretty much. So we can pretty much know that the stock market is going to be higher 4 years from now than it is now, no matter what. So that was never a truly strong talking point that we should have spent so much time fixated on. Another example of this would be the price of eggs. Donald Trump repeatedly lied and said the price of eggs were tumbling 80-90%. And Democrats also fixated on the price of eggs, as the Republicans did during the election. But that was also never going to be a sustainable talking point. As Democrats, we are the party of expertise, we're the party of critical thinking, we're the party of science, and we know that the price of eggs were going to come down eventually. And even though he lied about the amount they were coming down, they have actually started to come down recently a lot. And we have another talking point that we use that's gone by the wayside that we can no longer use. Each time we lose these talking points, it plays into the hands of Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And we cannot continue to catastrophize about all his policies that he makes, knowing that when it comes to the economy, knowing that he's going to backtrack and back down. I give an example that we should have had on the tariffs, which I mentioned in the previous video. The Democrats' position on tariffs should have been, he was never going to go through with such a stupid, unthought out, crazy idea. And if he did go through with it, it will cause so much damage and problems that he would have to backtrack. And when he backtracks, he's going to try to claim victory on some kind of token concession or some kind of deal that doesn't really make up for the short-term and long-term damage he has caused to the country and our reputation. When you make a position and take a position like that, no matter what happens, it's a win-win scenario. Either he sticks through with it and terrible things happen to the economy and he looks foolish and the Democrats look like they were right, or he backs down and he falls into the Democrats' talking point and he looks foolish. We cannot have a situation to where the worst not happening is seen as a victory for Donald Trump. And that's what's been happening, because we say all these bad things are going to happen, which would happen if he stuck to the plan, but we know he's not going to stick to the plan. We know that. And each time we do that, and we don't have a huge recession, all the shelves aren't empty, all the prices aren't skyrocketing, we look like the party who cried wolf. A lot of these low information voters or Trump curious or voters who voted for Trump, they didn't like him, but they just, voted for him just because. This goes in their favor, and it makes them less likely to realize they made a mistake if we continue with this type of messaging. And like I said before, it shouldn't be that hard to land a devastating economic message against Donald Trump and their crazy ideas. We must understand that these people are not going to feel shame about lying. They're not going to feel guilt about changing positions from one day to the next. So we cannot act as if that's going to be the case. If you want them to go down in the eyes of the American people, you have to tell them what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, and say it over and over again. So when that does happen, we look as though we knew what we were talking about all along, and Donald Trump looked like a fool for backtracking or even sticking to his plan. We can no longer afford, as Democrats, to have our talking points go by the wayside or to give any ground or any props to them to use against us. This is a fight for decency, a fight for the rule of law, the fight for the future of this country in so many ways. And he's doing lasting damage. And our message against him and the Republicans at large has to be clear, concise, reasonable, thought out through the long term. Not just short term, but through the long term. And once we do that, we can hold him accountable, hold his feet to the fire, so that when he backtracks, in the eyes of these Trump voters, it's seen as a defeat, not a victory. But when we catastrophize about what's going to happen, and then he backtracks and the worst doesn't happen, it's seen as a victory for Donald Trump, and it shouldn't be that way, and we have to change.